I think there's a lot of people that could apologise, but apologies work both ways.
What chances do you reckon, Meghan, of doing that?
Very slim. Slim to none. Let's go with that. Slim to none at this point. Unless the money runs out.
All right, well, the rift in the royal family is once again in the spotlight with Prince Harry.
When the interviewer pressed to find out who that was, he said he was not prepared to share at this point.
In May 2025, Prince Harry gave what appeared to be an ordinary BBC interview, but what he said sent shockwaves across Hollywood and revealed one of the biggest deceptions in recent entertainment history. The Duke of Sussex, speaking openly about his ongoing security struggles, made a revelation that directly undermined the foundation of his and Meghan's multi-million-dollar Netflix empire. Security was conditional upon holding an official role. Harry admitted with clear frustration, explaining that the position he and his wife wished to continue and had been denied back in 2020. In other words, they were pushed out. They didn't willingly step back. They were prevented from staying. Yet this is the same man who, alongside his wife, constructed an entire media narrative around the idea of choosing freedom, independence, and stepping away for their mental well-being and creative fulfillment. The revelation becomes explosive when considering that Netflix didn't pay them $100 to $150 million for just any content. They paid for a very specific story. Two royals who boldly chose to leave one of the most powerful monarchies in the world to create meaningful, inspiring stories. Ted Sarandos, Netflix's co-CEO, celebrated their authenticity, optimism, and leadership when announcing the deal in September 2020. The company bought into a fairy tale of voluntary departure, portraying Harry and Meghan as people who gave up unimaginable privilege to build something better, making their content feel emotionally powerful and authentic. But Harry's admission shows this narrative was built on falsehood. They didn't choose to leave. They were forced out. They didn't step away for creative freedom. They were removed and then scrambled to spin that rejection as liberation. Industry insiders say this changes everything. When a company pays 9 figures for content, authenticity isn't optional, it's the foundation. Netflix believed they were working with courageous truth-tellers, not dismissed insiders repackaging their dismissal as a noble act. Consider every documentary, every complaint about privacy, every criticism of the royal family, all framed as the perspective of people who chose to walk away. If in reality they were blocked from staying, then every piece of content becomes questionable. This isn't a minor detail. It strikes at the heart of a $100 million relationship. Netflix didn't just buy shows. They bought the Sussex's story, their truth, their version of events. And now that version has collapsed with 6 simple words. We wish to carry on, but was stopped. The real question is no longer about renewing their deal. It's whether Netflix realizes it was misled from the start. That BBC interview could be the moment that topples the entire Sussex Netflix empire. But this is only part of the unraveling. To fully grasp how damaging Harry's confession is, we need to revisit what Harry and Meghan originally told the world when announcing their royal exit. Their 2020 statement was carefully crafted to present them as architects of their own future. On January 8, 2020, they posted a formal message on their Sussex Royal Instagram declaring after months of reflection and discussions they had chosen to make a transition and begin carving out a progressive new role. The word chosen was deliberate. It implied freedom, not exile. They portrayed their decision as thoughtful and strategic, a move toward financial independence while continuing to support the Queen. They painted their departure as evolution, not expulsion. This positioning was crucial when pitching themselves to Hollywood months later. From Netflix's perspective in September 2020, they were 2 visionaries voluntarily walking away from guaranteed wealth, global standing, and institutional power to pursue something meaningful. Their official Netflix statement reinforced this, highlighting their independent experiences, their commitment to communities, and their mission to create content that informs and offers hope. Netflix wasn't just buying shows. They were investing in a brand rooted in sacrifice, choice, and noble purpose, a brand that could deliver award-winning, high-impact content. Ted Sarandos emphasized their authenticity and the inspiration they brought to millions. That inspiration hinged entirely on their supposed courage to choose a new path. Now, Harry's BBC admission undermines every element of that foundation. Their original narrative rested on voluntary action, months of planning, a progressive vision, a choice they proudly owned. If, as Harry says, they wanted to remain but were prevented, then their pitch begins to look deceptive. They didn't bravely walk away. They were pushed and then marketed that push as heroism. Netflix thought it was aligning with pioneers. It may have actually been funding spin. That difference could have massive consequences, potentially worth hundreds of millions. The evidence speaks for itself. Place Harry's 2025 confessions side by side with their 2020 proclamations. And the contradiction is undeniable. This situation is absolutely explosive, and not just a matter of small changes in their story or evolving viewpoints. It strikes at the very core of their entire media empire. On January 8th, 2020, Harry and Meghan made their official announcement. We have chosen to make a transition this year and start carving out a progressive new role within this institution. The word chosen was used repeatedly. They chose to step back. They chose financial independence. They chose to divide their time between the UK and North America. On March 7th, 2021, during the Oprah interview, Harry said, "My family literally cut me off financially, but even then, he framed it as a consequence of their choice to leave, not the reason for their departure," stating, "I've got what my mom left me," presenting their exit as brave and necessary, supported by Diana's legacy. On December 8th, 2022, in their Netflix documentary, Harry said, "We never had any intention of making this royal exit. We were forced into this situation." That already conflicted with their original, carefully planned narrative. Meghan described feeling unprotected, and Harry claimed, "Everything that's happened to us was always going to happen to us," presenting two conflicting versions. They chose to leave, yet they had no choice. Then came May 15th, 2025, and Harry's BBC interview changed everything. He stated, "Security was made conditional on having that official role that myself and my wife wished to carry on, but was stopped from being able to do that back in 2020. This completely flipped their story. They didn't choose to leave. They wanted to remain, but were prevented. Who stopped them? The royal family, the same institution they claimed for 5 years they voluntarily left. This is not just a contradiction. It's a total rewrite of history that exposes every Netflix production, interview, and grievance as built on dishonesty. Their documentaries, interviews, and entire victim narrative rested on the premise that they willingly left and were then mistreated. But if they wanted to stay and were forced out, their complaints become less about overcoming oppression and more about being dismissed, and then spinning that dismissal into a heroic tale, which is not the story Netflix bought. The timeline makes it worse. From we chose to leave in 2020 to we were forced into this situation in 2022 to we were stopped from carrying on in 2025. Each step drifts further from personal responsibility and deeper into victimhood. For Netflix, this is devastating. The company signed them in September 2020, only 8 months after their chosen departure, believing they were partnering with inspirational figures, sacrificing everything for their vision. Instead, they appear to have backed a couple who were let go and then spent years justifying it with elaborate narratives. That isn't inspiring, it's embarrassing, and potentially not worth $100 million. Netflix executives must now be questioning whether they were misled, and if they can reclaim their investment. Harry's latest excuse, focused on security, is even more revealing. When he says their security was tied to their official roles, he's not just admitting they were pushed out, he's exposing the real motive behind their obsession with maintaining royal titles and privileges. Their departure wasn't driven by noble ideals or a burning desire to create meaningful Netflix content. It was a calculated move over security benefits. If safety was such a pressing concern, why immediately sign deals that put them under even greater global scrutiny? You can't claim leaving royal life was about escaping danger, and then sign a $100 million deal exposing intimate family moments to the world. That contradiction undermines every privacy, peace, and independence narrative they've sold. It also reveals a deeper financial motive. They wanted taxpayer-funded security without the duties that justified it. When the royal family declined, saying, "If you're not working royals, you don't get working royal security," their response wasn't to accept responsibility, but to leave entirely and complain for years about being cut off. They wanted the benefits without the obligations. Netflix should now be asking hard questions. If this was really about security, what exactly did they pitch? Were they honest that this wasn't about creativity or principle, but about lifestyle preservation? Netflix thought it was buying stories of courage and sacrifice. It may have funded a protection plan. That's not inspirational storytelling. That's opportunism. Meanwhile, Meghan Markle's silence on this latest revelation is striking. Known for seizing every platform, she stayed quiet as Harry rewrote their history on live television. For 5 years, Meghan drove their narrative, painting the royal family as cold, racist, and oppressive, describing herself as suicidal and unprotected, turning their exit into a story of a strong woman escaping a cruel system. Yet, Harry's confession undermines all of it. The carefully constructed story Meghan presented about choosing to leave for her mental health and well-being collapses entirely if they were actually stopped from continuing their official roles because security was made conditional. You cannot claim to be a brave victim of institutional racism who willingly chose freedom while also being someone forced out over security disputes. For Netflix executives witnessing this unravel, Meghan's silence is striking. She was supposed to be the lead creative force, the face of their lifestyle content, the one promising authenticity for the platform. Yet when her husband contradicts the very foundation of their brand, she vanishes. Her silence reveals deliberate calculation. While Harry blurts out damaging admissions, Meghan avoids confirming his version to prevent undermining their Netflix narrative, but she also avoids contradicting him to prevent exposing their partnership as a business arrangement built on inconsistent stories. If they can't align on their own origin, how can they deliver genuine, unified content? Meanwhile, while Harry dismantles 5 years of their narrative on BBC, the royal family continues quietly doing its job. King Charles manages constitutional duties despite health struggles. Princess Catherine advances childhood initiatives. Prince William tackles homelessness, climate change, and mental health without issuing statements or rushing to defend themselves. Their silence is not weakness. It is discipline, the opposite of the chaos Harry and Meghan create. For Netflix, the contrast is embarrassing. They invested hundreds of millions in 2 people fixated on the job they lost, while those who stayed never mention them at all. Every time Harry complains about being blocked from his role, he highlights what he isn't doing, supporting charities consistently, serving without making it about himself, opening hospitals. The royal family's silence exposes how hollow the Sussex narrative has become. If the institution were truly as racist and cruel as they claimed, why does it function smoothly without them? Why hasn't their absence left a gap? Netflix should ask why they bankrolled people who spend more energy revisiting their old employer than creating something new. As Harry's confession spread, social media turned sharply against them. Side-by-side comparisons of his 2020, "We chose to step back," with his 2025, "We wish to carry on, but were stopped," trended under hashtags like #PickAStory. Celebrities and even Hollywood insiders began criticizing them, with some calling them professional victims who can't keep their story straight. Meghan's ventures, from her lifestyle show to her brand, were already struggling, and this contradiction created a storm that further eroded credibility. Even their most loyal online supporters went unusually quiet. unable to defend such glaring inconsistencies. Behind the scenes, financial pressures are reportedly mounting. An expensive California lifestyle with a $16 million mortgage, private security costs, and staff salaries demands millions yearly, while Spotify has already ended their deal, and Netflix is reportedly unlikely to renew theirs. Publishers, too, are growing wary. Many now suspect Harry's confession wasn't accidental, but strategic, a setup for a potential reconciliation with the royal family, a move that could stabilize their finances. Admitting they never wanted to leave lays the groundwork for a return, even if it contradicts everything they said before. Meghan's silence serves her interests here. She avoids directly damaging contracts, but lets Harry take the fallout. For Netflix, this is a flashing red warning. They believed they were supporting people who sacrificed wealth for principle, but they are dealing with individuals whose main priority appears to be maintaining an extravagant lifestyle, even if it means rewriting their past. The credibility crisis triggered by Harry's BBC remarks isn't just another PR hiccup. It marks the collapse of the very narrative that has fueled their post-royal careers. A sustainable brand needs a consistent core identity, and theirs has shifted from choosing freedom to forced exile to we never wanted to leave in just 5 years. That is not growth, it's incoherence. In content creation, authenticity is not optional, it's essential. Audiences can forgive errors, but rarely forgive dishonesty at the foundation of a story. Trust, once broken, cannot easily be rebuilt. This damage goes beyond Netflix. Future publishers will hesitate to fund memoirs, platforms will doubt their appeal, brands will avoid attaching themselves to people whose personal truth changes with each interview. And perhaps most revealing is what this chaos exposes about their decision-making. Experienced content creators understand message discipline. They know consistency sustains credibility. Harry and Meghan, despite all their resources and publicists, have failed to uphold even that basic standard advisors are meant to ensure consistency across all platforms and appearances. Yet Harry's damaging admission suggests either a complete lack of professional guidance or a deliberate choice to ignore it. Netflix executives must now be questioning what other contradictions might surface. If Harry and Meghan cannot remain consistent about why they left the royal family, what else in their story may have been fabricated or exaggerated? How can a streaming platform build reliable programming around individuals whose core narratives keep shifting? Now, 5 years after their dramatic departure from royal life, the fairy tale has completely fallen apart. What started as a story of courageous truth-tellers choosing honesty over duty has been revealed as something far more ordinary and disappointing. Two people who lost their positions and spent years creating elaborate excuses for why it wasn't their fault. Harry's BBC admission marks the moment their carefully built house of cards finally collapsed. The streaming giant invested hundreds of millions based on a narrative of voluntary sacrifice for creative freedom, only to discover the entire foundation was unstable. They thought they were supporting inspirational leaders who gave up everything for their principles. Instead, they ended up with individuals whose version of events changes every few years to suit their convenience. The irony is remarkable. Harry and Meghan left claiming they wanted privacy, authenticity, and creative independence. 5 years later, they have achieved none of those things. Their privacy has disappeared as they sold intimate details to Netflix. Their authenticity has been destroyed by their own contradictions, and their creative freedom has produced little more than vanity projects and revenge-driven content largely dismissed by audiences. Meanwhile, the royal family they criticized continues as before, quietly working, serving, and staying above the noise. The institution they labeled as cruel and dysfunctional has proven its stability by functioning seamlessly without them. The monarchy did not need them, and now Netflix seemingly does not either. The tragedy is that Harry and Meghan had every opportunity to create something meaningful after leaving royal life. They had a global platform, vast resources, and enormous public goodwill. They could have genuinely made a difference, produced impactful content, and redefined modern service outside traditional institutions. Instead, they turned every story into one about themselves, every project into a platform for grievances, every interview into a showcase of personal pain. Now, with Harry's BBC admission, it's clear even those grievances rested on constantly shifting narratives that contradict one another. Whether the Netflix deal ends now or lingers a few more months, the real damage is already done. No major platform can sustain a partnership with people whose central story keeps changing. The Sussex brand isn't just harmed, it's fundamentally broken, and they have no one to blame but themselves. The remaining question is whether this truly marks the end of their media empire, or if they will again attempt to reinvent their narrative. Can two people who have spent 5 years contradicting themselves ever rebuild the trust needed for a successful entertainment career? And if they cannot, what is next for a couple whose entire post-royal identity depends on being media personalities? What do you think happens next for Harry and Meghan's collapsing empire? Share your thoughts below. Hit that like button if this opened your eyes, and make sure you subscribe because the royal drama never ends, and neither do we. The next explosive twist could appear any day, and you won't want to miss it.